After 15 months of fighting in Gaza and well beyond, Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire deal. It will put an end to the fighting and free dozens of hostages held in Gaza, including Americans, in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. This deal will bring the first real break in violence since a week-long truce that expired more than a year ago. It comes after weeks of talks brokered by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt, and amid profound devastation and a humanitarian crisis in Gaza, where more than 46,000 people have died. An unimaginable worry and constant waiting and despair for the families of 60 surviving hostages kidnapped by Hamas after the terrorist attack on October 7th, 2023. Their families saying this morning, quote, "In light of reports about an imminent agreement, we welcome and deeply appreciate the return of every hostage, each one representing hope and relief, not only for their immediate family, but for our entire community. We urgently call for a framework that ensures the return of every person held captive." The three-phase deal follows the same structure that President Joe Biden first proposed back in May. He spoke this afternoon from the White House.
The elements of this deal were what I laid out in detail this past May, which was embraced by countries around the world and endorsed overwhelmingly by the UN Security Council. You know, there was no other way for this war to end than with a hostage deal. And I'm deeply satisfied this day has finally come, for the sake of the people of Israel and the families waiting in agony, and for the sake of the innocent people in Gaza who suffered unimaginable devastation because of the war. The Palestinian people have gone through hell. Too many innocent people have died. Too many communities have been destroyed. And this deal, the people of Gaza can finally recover and rebuild.
Israel and Hamas have yet to officially announce a deal, but NBC News has learned that the 42-day first phase to release 33 of the hostages in Gaza, defined as humanitarian cases, will start on Sunday. That breaking news is where we start today with former CIA director, MSNBC senior national security analyst John Brennan's here. Also joining us, former chief of staff at the CIA and at the Department of Defense, Jeremy Bash, is here. But we're going to start with my colleague, NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel, live for us in Jerusalem. Richard Engel, tell us what you're hearing and what you're learning and what the reaction is.
So there has been very strong reaction from Gaza. We have been in touch with our teams there. They're sending us video of people who were watching television sets intently as the news was coming in. Now you could hear a pin drop as people were focused on the screens, waiting for any word, because this has been a long several hours. There was reports that the deal was coming, and then there was a delay of a press conference. This deal was announced in Doha. And Doha, the prime minister of Doha was probably the key interlocutor here, the key negotiator, the prime minister and foreign minister playing an extraordinary role. And then when the deal was finally announced and then later confirmed, people went out onto the streets. They were celebrating. Some Hamas members also coming out onto the streets to show that they remain. They have been dramatically weakened, but they were showing, at least a few of them, just to say that they are still standing strong. But in general, there was a tremendous sense of relief that people can finally move around without the fear that they're going to be bombed at any moment, or that soon they will be able to live in an area where there are not constant airstrikes and drones overhead. In Israel, the reaction has been more complex, more subdued. This is not a happy day. This is a hostage deal after all. People are happy that the war is ending, happy that they can put this chapter behind them. This has been a very ugly period for Israel, ugly period in Israel's history, when first it was caught off guard and 1,200 people were massacred by Hamas, and there was a tremendous intelligence failure. And then when Israel launched its war, to find itself accused internationally of gross overreaction and accused of genocide. That was a deeply disturbing experience for people in this country. So there were some muted celebrations, I guess you could call it, but the hostage families are not celebrating. They're trying to be respectful of one another. The hostage families are either issuing statements, but those who, the families who are expecting to receive the initial hostages don't want to gloat. They don't want to celebrate because they know that other families are still waiting and that other families will not be receiving their loved ones, but only receiving remains. So this is a complex moment for Israel. For Gaza, they're very happy to be turning the page. For Israel, they still need to have a formal legal decision to accept the ceasefire. So we're going to expect to see Prime Minister Netanyahu facing some criticism, probably from members of the right wing of his coalition government. But there's little doubt that this ceasefire deal is going to be approved.
Director Brennan, President Joe Biden putting out a statement before his remarks today saying this, quote, "I laid out the precise contours of this plan on May 31st, 2024, after which it was endorsed unanimously by the UN Security Council. It is the result not only of the extreme pressure that Hamas has been under and the changed regional equation after a ceasefire in Lebanon and the weakening of Iran, but also of dogged and painstaking American diplomacy. My diplomacy never ceased in their efforts to get this done." Your thoughts?
Yes, Nicole, this is one of the tragic aspects of what I think has been a very good development in terms of a ceasefire and hostage release. But that nearly 8 months ago, this could have been put into place. And I think about all the thousands of individuals who have tragically been killed since that time. But it is the culmination of dogged efforts on the part of the Americans, the Qataris in particular, and also then the Egyptians working with the Israelis and Hamas to see whether or not there could be some arrangement. And so we're a few days away from what looks like it's going to be released of about 33 Israeli hostages. That's about half of the number of hostages believed to be still alive, even though there are over 90 that have not been accounted for. So I think this first phase is a critically important one and is likely to come off, the exchange and the release of some Palestinian prisoners. But the phases 2 and 3 are very aspirational, and I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in order to get there. But I think we can be pleased that we're seeing now what has been a breakthrough of what has been tried for many, many months. And I do give the Biden administration and the incoming Trump team also credit for the efforts that they have put forward to be able to achieve this result.
Jeremy Bash, your first reaction.
Well, first, let's talk about the 7 Americans who are part of those who are still being held in Gaza. We believe 3 are still alive, 4 whose remains we want brought back to their loved ones. The 3 who are still alive are 65-year-old Keith Siegel, whose wife was released in an earlier hostage release, and she's been waiting and advocating for his release. We're also awaiting the release of Sagi Dekel-Chen, a father of 3, 35 years old, from Kibbutz Nir Oz. These are the Americans I'm talking about here. And then, of course, Idan Alexander, who was an IDF soldier, an American citizen, and we believe that he is alive as well. So 3 living hostages. The 4 whose remains we are also expecting to come out are the remains of Omer Nutra, whose parents have been advocating so forcefully and so effectively for his release. Itai Chen, whose parents have also, we've come to know, and I spoke to his father, Ruby Chen, earlier today. And then Gad and Judy Hagai, who were killed on October 7th. That, of course, is in addition to the other Americans who were killed, like Hirsch Goldberg Poland, who was murdered on September 1st, whose parents, John and Rachel, had been on the world stage, meeting with the UN, the Congress, the Pope, the President. And so it's a bittersweet moment. And I would just say that no matter what happens this Sunday, it's not going to be over, because the way the deal is structured, Nicole, there's a 42-day gap between the time that phase 1 is implemented and the time phase 2 is implemented. And at this hour, we still don't know whether all of the Americans will come out. There have been some earlier reports that Sagi Dekel-Chen and Keith Siegel would come out, but that Edan would not because he's a soldier, that the remains would be left for a later stage. And I think that would be a terrible outcome. From my perspective, I know from the Biden administration's perspective and the incoming Trump team's perspective, all Americans should come out in phase one. There should be absolutely no delay, and nobody can spike the football or declare mission accomplished until all the hostages are home. And we are really at the beginning of a very difficult process. Previously, there were hostage releases, and then it broke down before phase 2, 3, and beyond could be implemented. So, Nicole, this is not, the end. This is the beginning of a very arduous, difficult process. And I hope the incoming Trump team maintains pressure and does not declare victory when they take office next Monday.